Hey everybody, this is Christian and today I'm going to show you how to run your own self-hosted GitLab platform for your HomeLab. This is super interesting because you can use all of the amazing features like a distributed version control system for your code and deployment files, or use it for issue and project tracking, webhooks and so much more useful stuff completely for free in your own self-controlled environment. To me, this is not only great for privacy and data control, it is also absolutely incredible as a learning project because I'm in my job currently working more and more together with software development teams or DevOps people, and I can just tell you, learning Git is such a fundamental skill everyone in IT needs to know today. So let's get into it, let's start learning Git and deploy your own GitLab platform at home. One more thing, because we are just talking about how important learning is for your role in IT, let me also tell you, learning is an important part of your entire life. And a fantastic way to do this, I just recently discovered, is with Imprint, the sponsor of today's video. Imprint is a visual learning app that uses beautiful illustrations and animations that make the learning experience feel more immersive and interactive. Their content library covers a huge scope of subjects from psychology, philosophy, leadership, science, technology, over to health and wellness, and so many more. The special thing about it is that Imprint focuses on your habits and routines thanks to their bite-sized learning lessons that are just 2 minutes long. I mean, who hasn't a few minutes time every day? Maybe when you're downloading the latest updates for your servers or installing packages. Don't waste it with scrolling through social media. Instead, use it effectively to learn something new. For example, with Imprint's 80 days course, Essential Philosophy, Theories and Thinkers. With over 30,000 5-star reviews on the App Store and Google Play and winning awards like Google's App of the Year and Apple naming Imprint an essential education app, it is one of the best ways to invest in your growth. To try everything Imprint has to offer free for a full 7 days, scan my QR code on the screen or click on the link in the description. As fans of my channel, you will get 20% off Imprint annual premium subscription, so definitely check it out. And now let's get back to topic. Alright, so first of all, let me give you a quick overview of the GitLab platform and let's define what actually is a Git platform. What the hell does it mean? Because many people believe that things like Git, GitLab and also GitHub are all kind of the same thing. But that is not true, because when we are talking about Git, we are just meaning the free and open source distributed version control system, or also shortly called VCS. And that does things like the source code management with repositories, branches, a change log and all of that stuff. And it is probably the most widely used technology for version control in the IT industry. Millions of companies use it for cross-collaboration software development and as a central storage for all of the code. And platforms like GitLab and also GitHub, they use the Git technology, but they also have built a service platform around that Git technology with a purpose to serve additional business needs and adding some features on top of it that the industry needs, such as project planning, CI/CD, security and compliance features, and so on. And the cool thing about GitLab is that you can also host this platform or most of the important parts of the service platform completely for free at home with GitLab Self-Managed. So this gives you some cool benefits like privacy and full control over your code, and that's exactly what we're doing in this video. However, I also want you to keep in mind that this might not be the best option to use for everybody. So self-hosting a massive platform like GitLab comes with its own challenges and responsibilities, but it is at least a fun experiment to try out. And because I've gone through some of the headaches myself, let me share how to set this up quickly. And I want to point you to the official GitLab documentation pages where we can look up all of the necessary installation instructions as well as configuration examples and useful information. And first of all, take a close look at the installation system requirements. I know this is always kind of a boring section and sometimes I just ignore it. But for GitLab, it is actually pretty important because GitLab is a heavy package that consists of many different applications and services, and it has huge requirements when it comes comes to storage, but also CPU and memory. And it only supports one very specific database, the Postgres database, and that in very specific versions. So if you're thinking about maybe using an external database for GitLab, then, well, think twice about it because you need to carefully meet those version requirements for Postgres, which is always a pain. So that is what you definitely have to keep in mind, as well as if you're running that on a virtual Linux server, make sure that it has at least 4 GB of memory. Anything less than 4 GB, trust me, will run just dramatically slow and it might not even work correctly. If you're expanding on your workloads, you might need to increase that even more, but make sure to have at least 4 GB of memory. So that's what I'm using for my virtual environment. And yeah, so GitLab has pretty huge requirements, but it's also very flexible in terms of installation and management. For example, you can easily install that using Linux packages and configure all of the different components yourself. You can also install it on Kubernetes using a Helm chart or an operator, or use the self-compiled sources. But if you know my channel for a while, you probably know that I just love to deploy each and everything in Docker whenever it's possible. And that's also my preferred method to deploy GitLab, because the Docker image that GitLab provides already includes all of the necessary components. So it's a single image that is pretty large, but you can easily deploy it and get quickly up to speed with the GitLab Docker deployment. Of course, you must have Docker installed before on your server where you want to deploy GitLab, so that shouldn't be a surprise to you. And by the way, if you don't know Docker, you don't know how to work with it, then please check out some of my other videos, because I have made millions of Docker related tutorials, so definitely check that out on my channel. And you also must have a valid externally accessible hostname. Don't use localhost. Now this is kind of a bit misleading, so it does not necessarily have to be externally accessible. So what we need is a DNS name that points to the IP address of your GitLab server, so where you're deploying GitLab. I will show you in a minute how you can run this completely in your local network as well. And another thing you need to consider is configure the SSH port, because GitLab uses SSH to interact with Git over SSH. That should also be pretty familiar to you. And GitLab wants you to change your OpenSSH server port, so that's the recommended way. But I don't follow this advice, so I don't like to change my OpenSSH port. Instead, I'm changing the GitLab shell SSH port, which is also pretty easy and simple, and it doesn't have any downside as far as I know. So it's all described in the documentation pages. Sometimes you need to jump around a couple of different sections, but don't worry, I will go through all of the necessary steps together with you. And by the way, if you want a complete write-up with all of the templates, the commands, and each and everything that I'm showing you in this video, then please check out my Patreon page. So there you can watch the entire video for free without any ad interruptions from YouTube. And I'm also attaching you the complete write-up for this video tutorial. But yeah, that's it about the requirements and the prerequisites. So let's go and install the GitLab environment in Docker. And I'm going to open a new connection on one of my demo servers and creating a new project directory called GitLab Demo 1. CD into this project and create 3 different folders: the config directory, the data, and the logs directories. That's what we're going to need for the persistent data storage for all of the necessary GitLab data that we want persistently stored on our server. And of course, I'm also opening this folder in VS Code, because that's so much easier for me to work on the remote server. I'm not starting with the Docker Compose YAML file this time. So first, I'm going to create a new file in the config directory called gitlab.rb. So this is our main GitLab configuration file, where we can add all of the necessary customizations we have to add. For example, I just talked about the SSH server ports. You just need to copy this and put it into the configuration file. So I'm using the port 2424. I think this is a good port, so it's not in use by any other service, and we can just use it for GitLab. And what we also need is to give it the external URL. So this is URL of the GitLab service. It's mainly using HTTP or HTTPS, depending on if you want to use trusted TLS certificates or just an insecure, unencrypted connection. I mean, who wants that really? But yeah, you could do it this way. I will also show you how to expose the GitLab service with trusted TLS certificates using my traffic reverse proxy and load balancer. But just know that you could do it a couple of other different ways. You can look it up in the documentation if you like. But this is really important for GitLab to function properly, to set this external URL to the name where the GitLab service is accessible. So in my case, I'm just going to use the GitLab Demo1 project name as a subdomain of my server Demo1 DNS name. So that points to the local IP address in my HomeLab. And of course, I'm removing any other port. So I'm just using the default HTTPS port, which is 443. I'm going to start now with creating the Docker Compose files. So here in this main project directory, just create a new file, dockercompose.yaml, and we're just gonna pick some examples here from that Docker file. So here are some Docker Compose files that we can use. So I'm just gonna copy that one here and paste it here. Of course, we need to customize a couple of things because first, I don't like this version statement. It's deprecated, we don't need it anymore. I don't know why this is in each and every official documentation, but anyway. And then we need to check the actual current image version somewhere here and go to the GitLab Community Edition tags. So of course, I'm not using the Enterprise Edition, that would require a paid license. So using the Community Edition, and here you can find the latest version tags that are deployed. So here, this is probably the latest version, is 17.1.4. Make sure if you're watching this video a bit later, it might be updated to a different version. And here also make sure that you change this EE for Enterprise Edition to CE for Community Edition. So that's really important. I'm also going to change the container name to GitLab Demo1. I just like that naming convention a bit more, but it's personal preference. It's not necessary. And I'm usually going to put the restart statement at the end of the file with an unless stopped. I don't like this always statement. And also the host name, I'm just going to set this to GitLab Demo1 as well. I think that should be fine. And note here, this environment statement, you can add the GitLab Omnibus config environment variable. So this will be similar to the gitlab.irb configuration file. So if you prefer to not store it in a file, you could also use environment variables here. But honestly, I don't like this approach, so I just prefer having it in one complete configuration file, not use the environment variables. So here, this is basically the same. And here you can add all of the necessary instructions as well. We just need to change this here and change it to the current directory where we have deployed all of the stuff. And I'm gonna remove those quotation marks. We don't need it here. And what we also need to take care of, because we just changed the SSH port in the configuration file of GitLab, we of course need to expose the port 22 on a different host port, the 2424. All right, this would basically work with TLS certificates that are issued by Let's Encrypt. You can see that GitLab by default is using Let's Encrypt with automated HTTPS and TLS certificates. You could also manually configure HTTPS with your own, maybe self-hosted certificates or trusted certificates that you've bought somewhere else. But the default configuration will try to issue for this URL TLS certificates by using the port 80 and 443 that must be accessible to the public Let's Encrypt servers to run validation checks. I think this is also a reason why they say it should be externally accessible. But of course, there are different ways to issue trusted TLS certificates. So I personally don't like this approach. I like to run my own certificates, or what is even better, run and configure a reverse proxy or load balancer for SSL termination. So I'm currently running Traffic as my primary load balancer in any Docker environments. By the way, check out my Traffic video if you're interested in how to configure it. So we can just use this for TLS termination in GitLab as well. There are a couple of changes that we need to make to the configuration files. So this here, for example, the Nginx listen port, we need to change to 80, and listen HTTPS we can set to false. So this with this configuration, the internal web service of the GitLab container does not try to use TLS in any way, just use an unencrypted connection, and then the traffic reverse proxy will terminate TLS and forward it to the internal Nginx server of the GitLab container. What we also need is here it is. So Let's Encrypt enable false. So this is what we need to set here. So then GitLab doesn't try to issue trusted TLS certificates using Let's Encrypt. And of course, then we also need the traffic labels. So that we need to expose this correctly. We should remove the ports because those are usually taken by the traffic reverse proxy already. And since it's terminating the connection, we don't need it. So first, let's connect it to my front-end network. So this is the external network, the Docker network that is already existing where the traffic container is connected to. And now we can simply just connect the GitLab project to this network as well. And now for traffic to pick up the GitLab service and expose it, we also need to add the labels, of course. So that's what I've just prepared for this tutorial. So this will enable traffic to expose this specific container on this domain, GitLab demo1, server demo1, home.crave.de. So this, of course, should match with the external URL here. And we're going to use the web secure entry point that exposes it using TLS, and we're using the already configured cert resolver Cloudflare. Again, watch my traffic video if you don't know how that works. And we're also going to change this port here. I don't know if we really need it, but in case traffic would pick up the wrong port for SSH or anything like this, we just want to make sure it's picking up the port 80, the one that we have configured here in the internal web service of GitLab. And yeah, I think this is everything that we need, and we can start deploying the container. If you want to make changes later, you can just add those lines in here, restart the container, and it's gonna be reloaded. All right, so make sure the files are there. I think everything is correct, and let's just execute Docker Compose up. Whoop, okay, so there is a small typo. It should be networks, I guess, and then it works. All right, so this will now do a couple of different things. It will seed the Postgres database. It will configure many things in the background that I honestly don't know what's happening here. So don't worry if it takes a bit longer. Use the time to enjoy a cold beverage. By the way, we now have temperatures over 30 degrees here in Germany, and I'm just sweating the whole time in the studio. It's just so incredibly hot. I need to drink something every few minutes. It is just so terrible, I can tell you. But yeah, so now the server should be up and running. There's not so much going on anymore. So we can just open a new website on the external URL that we have configured. And yeah, as you can see, this is our self-hosted GitLab environment in the community edition. As you can see, it's using trusted TLS certificates because of the traffic reverse proxy. It's pretty cool. And we can now start logging in with our username. Which username, by the way? Yeah, I haven't explained this to you. So first of all, we need to get the initial root passwords. That's the command that you can just copy and paste in the terminal. We need to grab the password from the GitLab demo1. So replace this with the container name that you have used. And this is our password that we need for the root user. So there are a couple of things. As you can see, this just looks like the regular GitLab Cloud version with a couple of differences here, because we are now the root user. We can customize all of the administrative settings in the admin area. And the first thing that we probably should do is check the sign-up restrictions, because by default GitLab instance allows anyone to register an account, just like on the public cloud version of GitLab. But we can deactivate this when you click on this button here, or go to the settings general and go through that sign up tab. So here you can just disable this. So this will require the admin user to set up an account. And this is probably better if you're using this in your local HomeLab or with a team that you control who has access to your GitLab platform. And also a couple of other things I would definitely do right before we start exploring the platform. So first of all, after changing the sign-up restrictions, I would change the username and the password of the root user. So you can do that when you go to your profile. So click on that small icon here and go to your profile section. So here in the profile, you can change the public avatar, the status and all of that stuff. And if you go to account, you can also change your username in here and also add secure two-factor authentication. By the way, I will show you how to connect this with my authentication provider, Authentic. So if you've watched this video, this will be super cool section. But first, let's continue this configuration. So now we have changed the username. We can also change the default password. So that is what we just gotten from the terminal here. And I'm just configuring here a new secure password and save this. Right, so now we need to log in again with our new username and the new password. And here we are again, so that's fine. Next thing, and that is probably the most important thing here, we need to go to preferences and change the appearance to auto, which enables dark mode. Still experimental, but super cool. This is so important. And we can also change the syntax highlighting theme to dark, so this will make the code sections much more readable and just much nicer. So let's save the changes here. Of course, you can customize all of those things here. Yeah, what is also pretty cool, you can also change the appearance of the entire platform here. So when you go to the admin area and go to settings, and here is the section appearance settings, you can choose a fav icon. You can choose any custom text here. You can upload your custom company logo to it. You can change and customize this entire platform to ensure company branding or whatever you want to do with it. Really nice, but for now I'm just happy with this, and I'm just gonna try deploying my first project. So creating a new project is very similar to creating just a new repository, and by the way, you can create it from a template. So if you want to use any of those templates here for deploying applications or managing software projects, you can do that, but I think blank project is also fine. So I'm just gonna give that test project one. Yeah, you can see I'm not very creative with my naming conventions. Now the visibility level might also be important. So if you're running this in your HomeLab, usually you're not exposing this to the public internet, so then no one should have access to your repos. But if you choose public, this means like anyone that can access this website in your local network can also have at least read access to your repositories. Maybe you don't want this. Maybe you want this to be internal, which can be accessed by any logged in users that you control as an admin, or private. So only your user has access to it. So make sure to configure this depending on what type of privacy you want in your local environment. So I'm just going to use private here and create this project. Yeah, now you can pull down this repository, you can clone it. By the way, I have forgotten one thing to set up my SSH key, so that's also pretty important. Let's go to add my SSH key. So here we can just add it, give this a title SSH key, right, and use it for authentication and signing. By the way, you can remove that expiry date, so it's recommended, but it's optional. You can make this a key valid forever and add this here. So now if that is the public key that you've configured on your local workstation, you can now just clone down your repository. So if we go to that here, you can see this just looks like the regular GitLab. Here we have the README file. We can use the web IDE to edit. So this is like a VS Code instance in the website of GitLab. Also pretty cool. But of course, I just like to work with this on my local machine. So I'm just going to go back to the project here and click on code. So here we can get the clone with SSH or clone with HTTPS. If you have added the SSH key, you can copy this here and open a shell on my local workstation. Let's go to this directory here and use a git clone on that project here. Note, this will automatically add the configured SSH port that you have used in the GitLab configs. And yep, you can see now this project is cloned to my workstation. Let's go into this test project here and open it in VS Code. And now we can just work with this code repo. We could add any file in here, for example, Docker Compose, and just deploy an Nginx web server. Maybe AI will generate Nginx Docker Compose file for us. Let's see if that works. Yeah, it kind of worked. Anyway, it's just a test project. And now once we have that, we can commit this change to our repo. You can do it in the terminal with a git add, and then this Docker Compose file, git commit, git push, or you can use the internal tools of VS Code that I think are just much more easier. So Docker Compose update, maybe commit this change, sync this. And if we go back to our GitLab platform and refresh the test project, you should see a new file, and you can see Christian Lemper authored just now a new commit to this repo. So here we can check this out. We can see what was changed. So for example, if we made some changes to the files, you can see what has changed in those repo files, all of the cool features of the GitLab platform, or you might know from any other Git repo you can use in GitLab as well, of course. It is really amazing. Now, before we explore the GitLab platform a little more, I want to show you some cool things, how I'm using this in my HomeLab to keep track of my HomeLab projects and deployments. Because one might say, well, why the hell should I run a massive platform like GitLab in my HomeLab that consumes a lot of resources? Instead, I could just run a local Git repository, store it on a NAS, and I'd be fine as well, because I'm just alone in my HomeLab. So you basically can use GitLab as a way to store all your repositories for any deployment files like Docker Compose files or Terraform code, whatever you want to store, and you want to have some version history and changelog tracking and so on. But that is a feature of the open source Git, so why the hell do you need GitLab? I want to show you one specific use case where I believe this is really useful for HomeLab people, and this is the issue and project tracking. Now, this is a common way in professional software development to work with many people collaboratively on one software project and track a couple of bugs, work together on sprints, and you probably know this from software development if you're working in that field. But if not, it might be very vague and very complex and confusing how software development processes are actually working. For me, as a former sysadmin, this was completely confusing and I didn't know the value of GitLab at first in my HomeLab. But once I discovered that, I just realized, well, this is super cool, even for smaller teams or just a personal project management. For example, we have some code here and we want to update the latest tag to a newer version. So update our Nginx server. We now go to issues and create a new issue for that. And we give it a description, something like update Nginx from latest to, I don't know what's the current version of Nginx, and maybe we'll just check it. So it was just recently updated here, as you can see, to version 1.27. Yeah, I think that is the latest version. So we just go back, specify that version in here, and open an issue. So now we can assign this to somebody. For example, if you want to assign those tasks to your colleague, he should update that. Yeah, you can do that. But if you're alone, you can just assign it to yourself and create that issue. And now if we go to issue boards, we have an open item here, yeah, update Nginx from latest version to that version. And we want to work on this project. What we usually do is we open that issue here. And because it is not complete, we can create a merge request or create a branch for this. I usually don't work in the main branch when I'm changing things in my HomeLab, because otherwise I'm completely confused and I never can keep track of what the hell I have changed a couple of weeks ago. So I'm gonna create a new branch for this, and it will automatically assign the name of the description for this branch. And if we now go back to VS Code, we can see that branch and check it out. So that is when we want to work on this project, and we can easily change the version latest to that specific version. So I know this is not a big change, but just imagine you have to change a couple of lines in a software development project. You have many files with thousands of lines of code, and you want to know what the hell is going on there and where you're doing those changes. Now we commit this change, updated Nginx version 2, and synchronize the changes. And now this is not done in the main branch here, so when we go back to the main branch, you can see the version is still the version latest, but it will notify us, hey, we pushed a new branch just now, and this branch contains changes where we have updated the Nginx version from latest to that specific version. And now we can merge this into our code base by just opening a new merge request. It will automatically select all the branches that we have created, so it's pretty clever and it helps us a lot to speed up the workflow. So now we are merging the changes that we have done in that branch into the main code base. You can also assign this to me. Of course, it contains all of the common software development processes and principles like reviewing, attaching labels and stuff, but you don't need to use all of these features. Yeah, you can just use it to keep track of your personal software projects. And this is now merging all of the changes into the main branch. And when we go back to the test project, we can see that those changes have been applied. Of course, this is also done in VS Code, so when we check out the main branch and synchronize all the latest changes, it will automatically update our files. And if we go to the issue board, we can see that there was a new item moved from open to closed. And now the way how I'm using this is, so I'm creating a bunch of different issues for all the things that I need to do, but I don't have time for today. So maybe update the Nginx deployment, update some other Docker containers, change a couple of config items, whatever I want to do. And then when I have time to work on those projects, I'm working on those issues and moving them to the closed state, merge them into the code base. This is how I'm working with this platform in my HomeLab. And of course, you can use so many other cool features. You can use automated deployments with pipelines and GitLab runners. You can deploy new software releases to production systems and do that in an automated way. It is super cool. But I know this is such a huge topic, and of course you cannot learn all this stuff overnight. For me, as a former IT service technician, those software development principles are also sometimes pretty confusing. But I think running your self-hosted GitLab platform and experiment with those things is much better than just trying it out in your company and merging a bunch of shitty code into a prod software project, yeah? Better do it in your HomeLab where you cannot do any serious damage. So just take your time and explore all these possibilities that GitLab has to offer and play around with it. Try to find out what you can accomplish for your own personal projects. And as a short teaser, in the coming weeks, I'm also going to review Git, which is another Git platform similar to GitLab that you can also easily self-host in your HomeLab. And once I'm done with it, I'm also going to make a comparison video about the two platforms, so stay tuned for future Git content on my channel. But that's it for today. I hope you could learn something new, and thank you so much for watching. Again, a big thanks goes out to all of my supporters on Patreon. You guys are just the best. You help me out so much with creating these free tutorial videos, and I'm going to catch you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.